Hey guys, welcome to our tutorial on the 2D Motion Key Editor. This tutorial is actually a continuation on from our 3D Motion Key Editing tutorial, where we created this motion that you see right here. If I just play this back. So if you haven't watched that tutorial, go ahead and watch that tutorial first, and you'll have a bit of a better understanding about the concepts we're talking about and the goal we have for this motion. You can see it's a nice run and a jump like that. So let's go ahead and get started on our 2D motion key editing. So to do that, I'm going to go back to frame 1 first, and let's make sure our character is selected and go to the 2D motion key editor down here. You can also use the K hotkey. And we're going to be doing body transform modification, which is in the body tab here, as well as deform, which is in the deform tab right here. If you go to pose, pose is mainly used for just a limb transform. So if I select the right arm, for example, I can move that around like this using that outer circle. I'll just Control Z and undo that. If I use the inner circle, that's going to affect the body a little bit more, and you can see the result right there. So let's just Control Z that. We're not going to be using that in this tutorial. We're only going to be using the body and deform tabs. So let's go ahead and select the body tab, and I'm going to press F3, go into my timeline. And our goal in this tutorial is, of course, to make this motion more dynamic and more energetic. Now, to do that, we're going to be utilizing a technique, a classic animation technique called squash and stretch. And I'll show you what that means in just a moment. First of all, you need to know that the tracks up here are the right arm tracks for the 2D motion key editor. This T stands for transform, and the D stands for deform. The S stands for sprite, so we don't really need that. We're not going to follow that in this tutorial. We'll just use the transform and the deform. So the transform, let's see what happens when I do the transform modification. You can see right now I have a blue selection box around my upper arm sprite. Let's just go ahead and stretch this out. And you can see that the lower arm and the hand uniformly stretch along with the upper arm. And so that's basically what the transform does. And you can go ahead and move the I'm just going to Control Z first. You can actually move the arm separately if you want to change the transform values of any sprites. If you want his arm to detach, you can do that. I'll just Control Z and undo that and bring it back to normal. So that's basically your transform. Now the deform, you can see it's a little bit of a different selection box with little gray nodes on the edges here. If I select one of those and I click and drag, I can actually free transform the sprite, and the children of this sprite, the lower arm and the hand, are not affected at all. So this is really useful for animation techniques like smearing or squash and stretch, which we'll talk about in just a moment. So I'm just going to Control Z that again, and let's get down to business. So what I want to do, the goal of this first part of this tutorial, is to squash and stretch our character to make the run seem a bit more energetic. So let's go ahead to the body section, the body tab, and I want to select the upper torso. And you can see the tracks here change to upper torso. And what I want to do is, let's follow this. You can see my character running like that. We want to bring him up a little bit so you can see where he's stepping there. And there you go. So what I want him to do is, when he's hitting the ground, I want to squash him. Squash him down real good. And make it seem like he's, squashing down into the ground, and then when he jumps up, I'm going to stretch him, just to make that animation seem more cartoon-like. And you'll see what I mean in just a second. So first of all, I'm going to double-click in the transform track and add a keyframe there. Let's go down to the frame where he's hitting the ground right there, and we want to squash him down. Squash him down by selecting his upper torso, and you can see that will affect his head, his arms, and everything like that. Something like that should be okay. And then we'll bring him back up to the point where he's up in the air. I think right there. Let's go right there. Yep, I think that should be fine. And then we're going to actually make sure the upper body is selected and select this button, which brings the sprite back to its normal proportions. Only that sprite. This one will reset all the sprite values. We'll talk about that later. But this one brings that specific sprite back to its normal value. And you can see that upper body goes back to normal. Now what I can do is I can stretch it out, because that's a normal proportion. I'll stretch it out a little bit, and we get a nice keyframe in our track there. And there we go. So now we have a squash and stretch, just like that. And then I want to go to the part where he hits the ground next, which is right here. And we'll just bring that back to normal and squash it down just like that. So this is basically what we're going to be doing in this tutorial. You can see we have a squash, squash, and then stretch right here. We can even just take this first keyframe and we can stretch that just like that. And let's go ahead and right click on that keyframe, copy it, and paste it to this place. I think about frame 25, whereas the cycle is complete. Right click there and paste that right there. And so let's take a look at what we have so far. Okay, so we have a nice squash, stretch like that. Now if I think my timing is pretty good, as you can recall, I cycled, or I just looped all of these clips. If I open up the 3D motion track, I looped a bunch of clips and I flattened them all into this single clip. But if you can recall, I looped them all at about 25 frames. So what I can do here is I can actually just select all my keyframes and copy them. But first what I want to do is add a little bit more dynamic movement to this. And that's what I'm going to be doing with an ease in. Now if you're unfamiliar with ease in and ease out, I recommend you check out our tutorial on the advanced timeline tutorial. But I'll also give a brief explanation here as well. So for example, between this frame here where we squashed and this frame here where we stretched, it's a very kind of uniform growth. So it's just kind of every frame he's growing at about, I don't know, 20%. And that's not what we want for dynamic movement, because it doesn't really happen like that in the cartoons. The way I can fix that is I can select this one keyframe right here, this one right here, right click it and select transition curve. And I'm just going to select custom for now, and it'll come up with this little window right here. And this will allow me to add a transition curve between this keyframe here and the keyframe before it. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to click here and select ease in. Now ease in basically means that in the first few keyframes there's not going to be much motion right here. But in the last few keyframes we're going to see more motion where the line gets more extreme, higher up on the y-axis here. So let's take a look. Move this to the side really quickly. And you can see in the first few frames, I'm just going to go with my left and right keys here. You can see there's not very much motion, but in the last ones, there's a lot of stretching in these last few motions right here. You can see most of the stretching takes place right there, whereas the first few frames, not very much. And we can make this even more extreme by going and making this curve even steeper. And you can see now there will be very little animation in this frame right here, but then it'll just kind of pop up in the last kind of 2 frames right there. That's maybe a little bit too extreme. We'll again select that keyframe. Let's bring it back down a little bit. Something about there should be good. And now we have a nice kind of popping up, whoop, just like that. Like that. So it's kind of a bit more of a ease in, a bit more of a cartoon-like feel. And we can pop up like that, and then down, and then again with this keyframe we'll do the same thing. So I'll select that keyframe and choose an ease in, make that a bit stronger, and that should be just fine. So now we have a very popping look like that. And then what I want to do is we can just go ahead and copy this, these 4 keyframes right here, right click all those and copy them, and it should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frames down from the last keyframe. Now this timing might not be exactly correct, but we'll give it a shot. We'll just go ahead and paste these, and that should be okay. Stretching out, yeah, it looks okay. And then from this point, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we'll paste it again. Otherwise we would have to do this entire thing for each specific frame, and who has time for that? Maybe if we wanted to have the timing exact, there may be some slight aberrations in the timing, but we'll just work with this for now. So there we go. Okay, and then we want to make sure that before he jumps, we do a little bit more. So here he's, so up here he's coming up again, and then down here we want to make sure he is back to normal. So let's go ahead and right here we can bring all of his sprites back to normal, or just his upper body, doesn't really matter. And there we go, stretching out, stretching out, stretching out. Oh, this one seems a little bit big, so let's go ahead and maybe bring that down slightly. I think he's, let's go back to the beginning and see how our character is running right here. Okay, so then we're good, but then here, what I want him to do is, he comes down here, and we want him to squash. So let's squash him down, make sure his upper body is selected, squash him like this, squash him like a little bug, and then here is where he's going to stretch out quite a bit. Now when he's jumping, we'll want to stretch out his entire body, because it's not only his legs that are being affected. This is a pretty cool thing you can do with jumps, and it's actually quite easy. You can see I was only stretching the upper body before, but now I'm going to stretch the entire body. So here he's squashed, and about here is where the height of his jump is. Let's zoom in on that section first so we can get a better look at the exact frames. And here you can see he is reaching the extent of his jump about there. So here I want him to, or rather the frame ahead, here is where I want him to be fully stretched out. So let's go ahead and zoom out a little bit. Now what I can do is select his hip. If you recall, when you stretch out the body transform, all of the child nodes will stretch out with it. And the hip is basically the center of any character. So if I stretch out the hip, that'll stretch out all the other sprites in the character as well. So now you can see I have the lower torso selected in the timeline right here. Lower torso transform. And the reason I have a keyframe right there is because previously I used this reset all, and that added a keyframe right there. But then we go right here, that's the height of my jump right there. I'm going to select this lower torso, and let's go ahead and stretch that out. And you can see the entire body will stretch out. That's a very easy way to do it rather than stretching each, body part individually, obviously. So that's kind of a shortcut. And you can see now, let's zoom out so we can actually see what's going on here. This is our character getting ready to jump, and then whoop, he stretches out just like that, stretches out, and then about here, when he's in the middle, let's go ahead and give him I think about here should be good. I want to set him back to normal, and we'll go ahead and use this one to reset all. Let's make sure we have the character in view so we can see the effect. And there we go. Stretch him back to normal, so there's stretches out like that. And then right here, maybe we want him to maintain this kind of normal proportion for now. We'll copy that keyframe and then leave it to about here. And go ahead and paste that. Just so he's normal between these frames right here. And then we'll go here and stretch him out. I think, there you go. We'll stretch him out right there. And that should be fine. Let's make sure we zoom in a little bit closer so we get the proportion correct. There we go. That should be fine. And then here we're going to squash him when he lands one more time. So maybe this one could be a little bit forward as well. And squash him right here. Let's really bring him down. And that should be fine, just like that. So stretching, squashing, and then here back to normal. I think when he pops up right there, squash, stretch, there we go, and reset all, and then we're back to normal, and that should be just fine. So let's take a look at that final result right there. I'll zoom in a little bit on the character, and there you go. We'll take maybe zoom out a little bit more so you can see the actual jump. There you go. So we get that nice kind of stretching like that and squashing coming back down. We can make that even more dynamic by using the ease in and ease out. So here, let's just right click that, transition curve, ease in. We'll actually go to custom, make it a bit stronger actually, I think. And that should be fine. And then let's take a look. There you go. It makes it a bit more just like that. And then when he's coming down, we'll ease into that one as well. This one right here. Select and ease in and bring that a little bit further up. And we should be good to go. That'll make it a bit more dynamic. So you see there we go. Almost like he's just, there we go. That's a lot more dynamic than the previous motion. So one final thing we're going to do here is we're going to do a little bit of deform, and that we're going to be doing that on his shirt, almost like he's wearing like a t-shirt that'll kind of be going in the wind along with his jump. So to do that, let's go to where he's starting to jump right here, and I'm going to go to the deform tab. Let's take a closer look at our character. We'll take out these transition curves for now, and right here we have the lower torso deform. We're only going to be using the upper torso again. So we'll just go to that tool right there, or that body part, and you can see that we are starting our jump right there. Let's make sure that we go to about here, and let's double click on that keyframe, and to about here, I think where he's at the height of his jump, this is where we want to bring his shirt back a little bit. So right there, that's the height of his jump right there. And what we're going to do is we're just going to stretch out this rear end of his shirt right there, kind of something like that. And you can see that the result we're going to get is like that. And then here, we want it to go back to normal. So again, let's bring the sprite back to normal and set a keyframe right there. Double click, and then here we can kind of have it go the other way. So let's go ahead and when he lands, I think we want it to stretch out forward like that, almost like his shirt is kind of going forward. And so here we have this like that, and then there we go. I think maybe we can even make it a little bit earlier than that, and something like that. So that. There we go, and then back to normal once he lands. Let's go ahead and reset the sprite right there. And that should be fine. Make sure we add a key right there. And let's take a look at that final deform result. Let's make sure we get the whole character in the screen here. There we go, jumping. There we go. Right there, that should be just fine. On second thought, I may want to actually make this a little bit later as well. You can see it kind of, if we just play it back, let's take a look. It looks not bad, but maybe the momentum is not really quite correct for the shirt, so maybe we want to keep it a bit more normal until, I think, here. And let's bring that keyframe a little bit further out. And let's copy this one right here, and maybe paste this somewhere about here, I think. That should be good. So let's see. Shoop like that. So we got the momentum, and then I think after he lands, which is about right here, then we can bring that shirt a lot forward. I think he lands about here, and then there you go. So it's kind of just like he's kind of falling down straight until here, and then I think maybe we want to bring it still a little bit forward. Let's bring these keyframes a little bit forward. Something like that should be fine. Okay, so it kind of just, landed and kind of stretched out his torso just like that. As he's landing, is kind of compacting like that. I think that looks a little bit better. So let's take a look at the final result again. Okay, so it's going really fast, so you can't really see it, but when you're doing this 2D motion key editing, every little detail counts. So here we go. Let's go ahead and play back the entire thing. Alright, so that's basically our finished motion. Very dynamic, very cartoon-like, which is the result we're going for. So let's take a look if this is actually in a scene. It'll look a little bit better when it's actually in a scene. So let's go back to frame 1 and maybe just zoom out and go ahead and into our content manager, go to scene, props, and go to our scenes here. Let's use our good old street scene right here. Just bring that in, and let's make sure that Saul is in a good starting position. So we'll just select him, and maybe kind of have him running through the street from this point to this point, where he starts his jump. We want to kind of, that looks okay. Let's have him maybe go to about here. I think that should be just fine. Oh, maybe you want to go a little bit faster. So let's take this point, move it down even further. I think he's sprinting at quite a healthy pace there. So if you bring that down further, there we go. Okay, and we want to make sure that, we at that frame where he's about to jump, we have to transform his values again. So here, let's press F3, go into our timeline just to get a better look at the transform track. And here is where he's jumping, and so he's there, and then here we will bring him to the position like a little bit further ahead on the timeline, something like that. We can make this jump or further ahead on the scene, not the timeline. Sorry, we can just jump as far as we want. Now let's go ahead and go through here, and then when he's up there and then he's landing, we want him to kind of land at a position, you know, it's further down again where he originally was. And that should work just fine, I hope. There we go. There we go. So that's a nice jump right there. And again, for that finishing touch, we can even ease in the keyframes. You know, if this one right here, let's go ahead and, you know, transition curve, we'll ease in this one right here. There you go. So that's a very nice dynamic jump right there. Alright, so that's basically it for this tutorial. We'll just play that through one more time just so you can get a look at it. And with the zoom out the entire thing. It's quite far away to zoom out. So this is going to be the entire run right here. Let's go back to frame 1. So hopefully you learned something about the whole process of starting from a 3D motion key editing, modifying an image, or modifying an animation rather, and then doing the finishing touches to add some more cartoon, energetic-like touches to the final result. So again, thanks for watching this tutorial, and stay tuned for more on our YouTube channel.